2024 coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that black subscribe button. Really does help our audience grow, really does help our channel grow, really does help and mean more than you could possibly know. So go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Also, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet 50 on any game, get $250 in free bets. Thank you again to Betfred. Thank you again to you. Now, here is the video that you came here for. And I do want to hit on a topic that you guys and girls, especially this time of year, you absolutely love. And that is some transfer portal conversation. And I think this is the second time that we've really done one of these transfer portal updates here on YouTube. And the bottom line is I think now is kind of a good time to do it. One, because you guys and girls love it. But two, there really are some developments since the last time we did one of these. Keep in mind, the portal opened about 10 days or so ago now. We've had hundreds, if not thousands, of names enter. And so I'm not going to be able to get to every single little news and note, but there's about 4 or 5 things that I really want to hit on because these are names that could impact college football next year, and especially now. We have kids taking visits, we have kids visiting campuses, we have kids meeting with coaching staffs, and we have kids that are committing. And so it feels like a good time to do a catch-up, let you know what's going on, give you all of the key details. The first place I want to start is really, it's at Texas A&M. And so Texas A&M has had a lot of guys lost to the portal, but everybody, there's so much negativity nationally around Texas A&M. But the bottom line is they really haven't lost too many guys that are ultimately all that surprising. At Texas A&M, most of the guys that they've lost are frankly the guys that you lose at pretty much every program. It's back end of the bench guys that weren't going to play or guys that have gotten into some sort of trouble and maybe frankly weren't even welcome back in the program, right? And so everybody loses back end of the bench guys. But when you're A&M, when you recruit at the level that they do, when you struggled this past season, there's always going to be conversation around you. But specifically, there are 3 players in the last week or so that have entered the portal from A&M that were part of that 2022 recruiting class that are now starting to pick up some really interesting recruiting buzz. And I think we're starting to get an understanding of where they are going to go. All 3 to some degree had some sort of trouble at Texas A&M, but the bottom line is when they are as talented as those kids are, you're going to get a second chance. And I'm not saying they don't deserve a second chance, but when you're that talented, you're going to get recruited by some major schools. And so let's get into some of those players who are now very much in the portal and could be making decisions soon. First player I want to talk about was the highest ranked of the 3, Denver Harris, Denver Harris, 5-star cornerback from the city of Houston. He committed a little bit later in the process, right after the first national signing day, originally committed to Texas A&M over Texas, over Alabama. And he was a guy like the other 2 that I'm about to talk about. He was actually on the field playing pretty well early in the year, but also a guy that he got into trouble. Not criticizing him, not saying he's a bad person, not saying anything like that, but he did get into some trouble. He was one of 4 players, that's correct, 4 players that was suspended for the Miami game. If you remember in week 3, there were 4 players suspended, was reinstated, and then about a month later was one of 3 players that was indefinitely suspended. My understanding was he wasn't welcomed back into the program, and so he hits the portal. But now that he is actually in the portal, he's getting quite a bit of interest from schools across the country. What we know, and I should mention, by the way, when he was actually on the field, he was very productive, finished his A&M career. He only played in 5 games, but still finished overall with 14 total tackles, 3 pass breakups, got major minutes at one of the cornerback spots. And there are 2 very interesting developments in his recruitment. One, Wednesday night, pictures start to surface that he is on LSU's campus visiting the Tigers. Why that's interesting to me is pretty straightforward. One, they were one of his finalists. Houston is obviously a natural recruiting base for LSU. LSU brings in a lot of talented players. But 2, I do think it'd be kind of an interesting landing spot for him because Brian Kelly, since he's gotten there, has talked so much about culture, so much about accountability, so much about all of those things. And so this was a kid that got into trouble at Texas A&M. And I think what it says about the fact that Brian Kelly is recruiting him, 1, he's insanely talented, but 2, I think it speaks to the fact that Brian Kelly thinks that culture at LSU is starting to get established and that he believes that he has the leaders in place that can help this kid kind of get in line with everything else, whether that's Jaden Daniels, whether that's some of the veteran wide receivers, the defensive players like Harold Perkins, who almost committed to Texas A&M, who did commit to Texas A&M, didn't sign with them last year. So the fact that LSU is interested in this guy, one, tells me he's insanely talented. But two, I don't think Brian Kelly takes a chance if he doesn't believe that he has a locker room that can keep this guy from getting into trouble. The other school that he's been linked to, Denver Harris, former five-star cornerback who played at Texas A&M, Colorado, and Coach Prime. And so I don't know if it's going to happen. We don't have any speculation on if he'll actually visit. But one, I think it's obviously a perfect fit for a cornerback to go play for Deion Sanders. Two, kind of ironic, his name's Denver, go play in Colorado. But three, you talk about what kind of team Deion Sanders could be putting together. Another coach, by the way, in Coach Prime, who preaches accountability, who makes sure all of his guys stay in line. Be very interesting to see Denver Harris there as well. But those appear to be the two for Denver Harris, LSU, and Colorado. Let's keep it going with the other A&M guys. Another guy that got into quite a bit of trouble this year, but has an insane amount of talent, wide receiver Chris Marshall. He was actually ranked one spot behind Denver Harris in the 24/7 composite rankings last year, a top 25 player overall, a five-star wide receiver, a player who, again, when he was at Texas A&M and he was on the field, was very productive, finished with 11 catches on the season. But unfortunately, like Denver Harris, got in a little bit of trouble. Suspended for the Miami game, indefinitely suspended later in the season, and he is no longer with the Texas A&M program. What's interesting about him, Chris Marshall, this is the wide receiver. It is the fact that he is, like Denver Harris, a Texas native. And the reports are he's one of two players that could be on the verge of committing to TCU. How about that? So we have recently Steve Wiltfong, who is the most plugged-in recruiting expert in high school and college football, has put in 24/7 Sports crystal ball predictions for both Chris Marshall from Texas A&M and JoJo Earl, a transfer from Alabama. To me, what that speaks to is what matters. I'm always amazed by how quickly narratives about teams and programs can flip. Right now, TCU is hot. They're the buzz team in college football. They're probably the buzz team in Texas, the first ever team from the state of Texas to qualify for the college football playoff. Yes, that is a fact. Texas never got there. A&M's never gotten there. TCU has never gotten there. And so I just bring it up because to me, would be obviously a natural fit, and credit TCU, who seems to be in on a level of transfer that speaks to how successful their program was on the field this year. The final A&M guy I want to talk about, a defensive back, Smoke Bowie, originally from Georgia. Now, he did get in trouble early, was one of 4 players suspended for Miami, but he did bounce back and have a great second part of the season. Played for Texas A&M in most of the season. Overall, this was, Smoke Bowie, again, this season did take care of business, did step onto the field, and did really have a pretty productive season, played in 7 games for A&M. And my understanding is he was one that was actually one of the few surprises at A&M overall in terms of hitting the portal. Talked to my buddy David Nuno about it from Texags Radio. He said that Smoke Bowie had talked a little bit about being a little bit homesick. And so now Smoke Bowie, high 4-star cornerback in the class of 2022. He was a player that was number 68 ranked overall. I think I said corner. He's a defensive back, plays safety and corner. Anyway, the point being, he is in the portal. The early buzz here is that Georgia's actually the team to beat for Smoke Bowie. Would be really interesting. He's from Georgia. As I said, there were some homesickness factors. And for him, obviously, to go back home and have the opportunity to play at Georgia, I think that would be huge. Obviously, again, the culture, everything going on at Georgia is right now. If he decides to go back home and play for the state school, you cannot blame him. Let's get to some other news and notes outside of the guys leaving A&M. And let's get to some positive on A&M, because I don't want it to be all negative when it comes to Texas A&M. That's because they appear to be trending in the right direction for a cornerback coming into A&M, not leaving, and that is Tony Grimes from North Carolina. I think we talked about Tony Grimes on the last update. Very interesting story. was a 5-star in the high school class of 2021. That was obviously 2021 would have been the fall of 2020. A lot of high school football wasn't being played. I think he would have played, but he decides to reclassify and go to North Carolina a year early. Gets to North Carolina, 5-star signee, and was actually phenomenal for North Carolina. Played 3 years. Now, I don't know if he necessarily like totally reached his potential. And obviously, I think that's part of the reason why he's transferring. But I bring it up because he's hit the portal and he's been very active. You know, I saw an interview with his dad with The Athletic, and they said they're trying to get to as many campuses as fast as possible. But the good news for Texas A&M is that Tony Grimes, former 5-star corner, you know, it's getting a little hot and heavy with Texas A&M. He was at Texas A&M earlier this week. He's expected to revisit again this weekend. He has also visited USC and he visited Virginia Tech just a few days ago. Tony Grimes, right now, the early buzz is Texas A&M. There's been some Oregon buzz there as well. A&M, USC, Virginia Tech is where he's visited. But to go back to A&M for a second time in 2 weeks or in a week, probably 10 days, that's probably nothing but a good sign. Couple other news and notes from across the portal. You know, I'll tell you this. Really interesting story. A kid named Ajani Cornelius, who played the last 3 years at the University of Rhode Island, was an FCS player, all conference this year, 6'5", 330-pound offensive tackle. How about this kid? Decides to enter the portal. You know, PFF, I'm not a huge like PFF analytics guy, but they did grade him as one of the best offensive tackles in FCS football. Well, he has hit the portal and he is a name to know, okay? Has gotten offers from Auburn, Tennessee, visited Nebraska and Oregon last weekend. I think what's really interesting there, just within the last 24 hours or so, Ohio State has offered him. So be curious to see if Ohio State could be a factor for him down the road. But Ajani Cornelius is a name to know there. You know, just looking across the rest of the transfer landscape. And remember, by the way, AaronTorresOnline.com, we have our transfer portal tracker there that you need to be following. Just a lot going on. Busy day, by the way, at Kentucky. J.Q. Hardaway, a former 4-star cornerback who played at Cincinnati, commits to Kentucky. Big 6'3" corner. Luke Fickell, we know, knows defensive players. J.Q. Hardaway goes to Kentucky. Great get for them. They actually lost a corner to the NFL draft on Thursday. So for them to get him is big. Marcus Cox, also offensive tackle from Northern Illinois, commits to Kentucky. So 2 big commitments for them. Michigan picked up Ernest Hausman from Nebraska. He had 54 tackles this year, 2 TFLs and 1 sack. Ironically, had one of his best games against Michigan. And so credit to Michigan, a second big-time transfer portal pickup for them. They also added an offensive lineman. And really, the other big piece of news that I do want to get to before we get out of here, it does involve, well, 2 other pieces of news. One, Gavin Holmes, another cornerback, Wake Forest. He did pick up an offer from Colorado earlier this week. What's interesting about Gavin Holmes, you know he's a good player for this reason. He is, as of right now, the only player that Texas has offered in the portal. So Texas had a big portal class last year. They've scaled it back. A lot of guys coming back, a really good 2023 recruiting class. Texas has scaled it back in the portal. Gavin Holmes, the only player that they've actually offered. And oh, by the way, you know who else made news on Thursday? Travis Hunter, the cornerback, of course, from Jackson State, was the #1 high school player in America, commits to Jackson State in a stunner just a year or so ago. Obviously was committed to Florida State, goes and plays for Coach Prime. So why do I bring it up? We keep saying it appears as though he's going to follow Coach Prime. Now, Jackson State has its final game of the season this weekend. I bring it up to say, Deion Sanders was Coach Prime. I'm sorry. Sometimes I call him Deion. He is one of those first name guys. He wants to be called Coach Prime. I'm going to try to respect that. Okay. So Coach Prime was doing an Instagram live and somebody asked him, when is Travis coming? And here's what Coach Prime said. He said, real soon. What do you think Travis is going to do? What is wrong with y'all sometimes? Some of the stuff y'all say just puzzles the heck out of me. Coach Prime indicating Travis Hunter will play the final game for Jackson State this weekend, and then he will be headed to Colorado. That is your transfer portal update for this week. Again, if you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube page. More transfer portal stuff probably coming as early as Monday because it's a crazy time of year.